of my favorite things that Fuji does with their lineup is that every time they settle on a sensor, especially on the APS-C lineup, they always use that same sensor in all of their cameras. So basically, you're just purchasing form factors and your price point. You don't need to make a decision based on image quality. That's interesting because a lot of other cameras will try to upsell you on image quality or megapixels, all the other stuff that comes with the sensor itself inside the camera, whereas Fuji looks at it a little bit differently. They know people want tailor-made use case scenario cameras that are specifically made for a particular situation. And the Fuji X-E4 is a prime example of a camera just like that. The Fuji X-E4 is a very small, compact, little pocketable APS-C Super 35 camera that rivals the same image quality that you're gonna see in your Fuji X-T4s, your Fuji X-T3s, and also it's probably most direct competition within its own family, the Fuji X100V. As you can see here with the form factor, it basically is the same size as a Fuji X100. The main difference now being that you can attach any lens that you want to the camera, which in my opinion adds versatility that is lacking on the X100V. I want to talk a little bit about the X100 series for a second. I've done videos on this camera series before, but I think the X100 is a super niche camera. If it is a camera that you're looking for, you're actually better off looking at a used one like a Fuji X100F or even an X100T. I have a video all about the Fuji X100T and I do love that camera, but because it's such a niche fixed lens camera, I just think it's a camera that's worth about $500-600, maybe $700 on the top end. And the main reason being is because it's a fixed lens camera. So the shooting experience is great. I also love that it has an optical viewfinder. So if you want that niche film feeling, yes, an X100 is absolutely fantastic. But if you're someone who wants to grow as a photographer, if you just want some flexibility while you're out in the field, having a camera with an interchangeable lens system is invaluable. And I think that's why the X-E4 is special. Where it gets a little bit complicated though is that we also just reviewed the Fuji XS10. And now the XS10 seems to be in the mix of all of these cameras. It's a mixture of an X-E4 and also an X100 and also an X-T3, X-T4. It's the most hybrid of all the hybrids, as I mentioned in the review of that camera. And I don't want to make this too confusing, but I still think the XS10 has a place and the X-E4 has a place, even though they're relatively priced similar. The XS10 is for people that are more into the video side, but also take photos. And they also want something with a flip out screen because maybe they want to do vlogging or shoot YouTube videos. I think that camera exists on its own, whereas the X-E4 is all the best parts of the XS10 on the photo side in a compact body, more tailored to a photo shooter. And I think that's really awesome because as we move forward, we're seeing a lot of these hybrid cameras really lean into the video side of things, whereas the X-E4 is primarily a photo first camera. And I like that it's a photo first camera because we need some good photo first cameras. So this is a travel camera. This is a great camera. I call it a belly bopper because you can just hang it around your neck and walk around and you don't really notice that it's there. It's so light, it's so compact, but the versatility of having that interchangeable lens system really sets this camera apart from the X100 lineup. We're gonna get into a slideshow of images that I've taken and even some video samples, but I just wanna give you a use case scenario for a camera like this. So over the weekend, I had this camera and I was out shooting. And if I had my X100 with me, a shot like this pretty much would have been impossible. But because this camera has an interchangeable lens, I can throw my 18 to 135mm lens on here. And all of a sudden now I have a telephoto camera out of my little travel compact camera. That is that versatility that is unmatched with the X100. As cool as it is to have a nice fixed lens, sometimes you just want to swap lenses. And for someone like me who has an X-T3, and I'm also thinking of grabbing an XS10 still, when I'm out on a client shoot, it'd be nice to have a little backup camera that I can keep in my pack that doesn't take up a whole lot of space, but I know, if a battery dies or if I just want to swap cards quick or if I just need a second camera with another lens on it so I can dual wield, I know that camera's there and my lenses will match, and I also know the image quality will be identical. Now, where this camera gets super interesting and where I really think it becomes an X100V killer and an X100 killer in general is this Mark II 27mm pancake lens. I've wanted a pancake lens from Fuji for my X-T3 even since I first got that camera because, you just want a slim form factor sometimes. You don't want a huge lens protruding off the front of your camera. Now, the Mark I of the pancake, although it was a good lens, it just didn't have the greatest reviews and I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. So now that there's a Mark II, I was super stoked. And so when Fuji first reached out to me with Moment to try this camera, the first thing I said is I really want to try this new 27mm pancake. And you can see why just by looking at the form factor. Now you have basically an X100, but you can change lenses whenever you want. So I would probably just keep this pancake on it for 90% of the time, but for those 10% chances where you want to switch the lens out, you can. And I'll say it a million times, but that versatility is why this thing is way better than spending extra on a Fuji X100V. Now this new pancake is awesome. Here's a couple shots that I've taken with it just bopping around the city. You can see even the depth of field is wonderful. Now, although I've said and I've praised that this is a photo first camera, it's still not a slouch on the video front either. This thing does do 4K DCI up to 30 frames per second. It also do HD 60. It is 8-bit 420 internally, but the crazy thing is you can still plug this thing into a Ninja 5 or an external recorder and you will get 10-bit 422 4K DCI over HDMI, which is kind of fascinating when you consider the price point of this camera. For an $850 body-only camera, and especially considering the size of it, the fact that you can even do 4K DCI 10-bit is nuts. I mean, honestly, the fact that Fuji even allows you to do this is fantastic and crazy. So if you are someone that just needs a budget travel shooter, the 8-bit 420 4K is great, which I also talked about on the XS10 video, is the fact that even though it's 8-bit, this F-Log does grade quite well. That being said, these cameras have all the film simulations baked in. So if you were gonna shoot video, if you're out traveling, you just need some short clips, I would recommend throwing that in Eterna or just throwing it in Provia and getting a nice out of camera look as opposed to trying to grade it in post. But if you had to, the F-Log's there. And a weird thing is that this thing also has F-Log view assist, which is something even the X-T4 doesn't have. I think it's kind of interesting because it only shoots 8-bit, and the fact that you really shouldn't be shooting log and 8-bit, but they gave it F-Log view assist so you can actually monitor the Eterna LUT at the same time. Kind of weird. I definitely hope they bring that to the X-T4 in a firmware update at some point, but it's there and it's a great feature to have if you need it. And of course, if you are using the HDMI, it's nice to be able to just throw a LUT on so you're not viewing that log profile. Now, this camera does not have internal image body stabilization though, so you will be feeling micro jitters with it unless you use an optically stabilized lens. Fuji lenses are pretty well known for their optical image stabilization, so I think this thing does perform well with an OIS lens, but if you're bopping around with that pancake, just be ready for some micro jitters that you probably have to fix up with stabilization in post. Let's talk a little bit more about the ergonomics of this camera because it gets kind of interesting because you can purchase some accessories to make this camera more ergonomic if you need it to be. So at a base level, this is just a super slim, low profile camera with a tilt up screen. Now we talked about this in my Fuji X-T4 review. I actually prefer the tilt up screen for a photo camera. I think it's better for hip shooting and I just feel like it's a better form factor than a tilt out screen. If you are a big video shooter, sure, I understand why you like the tilt out screen, but if you're someone who's primarily photos first, I almost guarantee you will prefer the tilt up. So in terms of those accessories though, you can add a thumb grip and as well as a body hand grip, which now puts us a little bit closer to the ergonomics of the XS10. It's not quite as deep and it's not quite as comfortable, but the options are there. And I'm also sure that third party will probably come out with some options too to make this camera feel a little bit nicer in the hand. Now I know a lot of you are probably also thinking, wait a second, I have an iPhone 12 Pro Max or I have an iPhone 11 even. I have a really good smartphone. Why would I ever want to buy an $800 camera like this when I have a good phone already in my pocket with probably a similar focal length to that pancake? The only thing I can tell you is that yes, phones shoot great images. I am someone who posts smartphone images all the time and I have a blast shooting with them. But there is just something special about the shooting experience of a real camera that cannot be matched by a smartphone. It's the way it feels in your hand, you compose differently, the way that you shoot is just entirely different than when you just pull out your smartphone and kind of spray and pray and shoot stuff. A camera like this just lets you appreciate photography more. And it sounds so lofty and stupid, but it's true. Cameras have to inspire you. It doesn't matter about the sensor, it doesn't matter about anything else. The camera has to inspire you to shoot. And there's just something about Fuji cameras that is really inspiring. I shoot some of my best photographs on Fuji cameras, not because they have the best image quality or the best sensor or anything. It's just the way they feel in your hand. It's the way that your brain interprets how it's holding something and the way you point and look at things. You just look at things differently when you use one of these cameras. And so as good as smartphones are, and they will continue to get better, I still think there is a market, and there always will be a market for a dedicated, almost point and shoot style camera too. This camera is small, it can fit in your pocket, it's great for travel, it's great for a weekend getaway, it's great just to keep with you at all times in a backpack or in your pocket, right? And so if you are someone that shoots on a smartphone and you're looking to up your skills, you wanna get a little bit more into photography, I would definitely recommend looking at the Fuji X-E4 because I think it's one of the best complementary cameras to a smartphone. It's a great way to jump from smartphones into a real camera, whatever you want to call it. Because you're not going to get much of a size difference, but you are going to get much better image quality. And on top of that, like we said, the inspiration from the shooting experience will be unmatched. Now we're coming up to the part of the video which is always my favorite, which is just showing you what this camera can do. For this, I wanted to do it a little bit differently. I know in the past I've done some street vlog type things where I've put an Osmo Action in my mouth so you can see what I'm shooting. What I found though is by doing those, I'm actually a bit distracted by the fact that I'm filming myself taking pictures, and I lose kind of reference point of like what I'm taking pictures of because I'm focused too much on the capturing of the picture. I know it's hard to explain, but I want to just focus on actually taking good images this time. So I did take a few behind the scenes shots here and there with my iPhone, but for the most part, I just want to give you a slideshow of photography that I shot with this over the 2 days that I had it on the weekend. I just took it with me everywhere. So I just want to chill out, relax, go pour a cup of coffee or whatever, maybe a beer, and just relax and enjoy some of these images that I shot with the Fuji X-E4, and I think they look great. But enjoy this little slideshow and then we'll wrap this up after. Just like every Fuji camera, the images always speak for themselves. Those classic chrome JPEGs always look fantastic. One thing that I did do this time is I tweaked the classic chrome a little bit. In settings, you can kind of enhance the classic chrome blues and you can add a little bit more grain built into the camera itself. And so the JPEGs that come out of this are just fantastic. You don't have to edit anything if you don't want to. It kind of reminds me of shooting film because what you see is what you get. And by the end of it, you could sit there and manipulate the raw image however you want. But for the most part, I think what's fun about a Fuji camera is playing with the film simulations and kind of bopping around and treating it like a roll of film. And then when you get your images, those are your images. You can crop and reframe or whatever you need to do. But for the most part, the color is there and you just don't have to work on them. It's all about framing. It's all about composition. It's all about your eye. It's not about the technical side. And I think that is what's so cool about Fuji cameras. And I think Fuji coming out with this little model and not really holding it back in much ways, aside from some small limitations on the video side and maybe not including IBIS or whatever, it's just such a competent little pocket shooter for the money. There's also really not much for me to nitpick on this camera because it's tailor-made, specifically designed to do what it does. I don't want to compare it to an X-E4 or even the XS10 too much because it's not the same camera. And even if it has some technical limitations towards the X100V, which it really doesn't, I still think the price and the fact that it has interchangeable lenses puts this camera above the X100 in my mind. And if you do want that niche X100 experience, look at an X100F or an X100T and save a bit of money because I can pretty much guarantee you'll have that camera and it'll be fun for a little while and it'll be nice to have on the shelf, but you would grab an X-E4 9 times out of 10 before you grabbed the X100, just for the possibility that you run into a situation where you do need to switch lenses. So the X-E4 is a winner in my books. Fuji keeps knocking it out of the park. If you're looking to pick up this Fuji X-E4, I just want to shout out today's sponsor, which is Moment. Click the link in the description of this video. A lot of people think Moment is just like a lens company or they make backpacks and stuff, but Moment is a full-out camera store now. You could buy a Blackmagic Pocket there if you wanted to. One of the things I really love about Moment is that if you buy something, the shipping is insanely fast. And I don't want to make promises, but I live in Canada and they're in the States, and everything that I've bought from them has arrived within 2 days. I hate waiting for packages, and so when I buy something and I'm shopping for something, Moment is usually the first place that I look. So if you're looking to grab the X-E4, or if you want to grab that pancake for your existing Fuji camera, definitely check out Moment. They're a wonderful shop, and they don't just make smartphone lenses or bags anymore. They are a full-out camera store, from everything from phone cases to cameras to lenses to filters. So thank you again to Moment and Fuji for letting me review this camera and checking it out. Let's talk about in the comments. Do you think the X-E4 is better than the X100? Do you think the XS10 is still the best buy now? I think I gotta spend a little bit more time with this X-E4 to make a full-out conclusion, but for right now, I really am enjoying this camera, and I think at the price point, it sits really well in the Fuji lineup for a tailor-made specific use case, which is a travel street shooter that just kind of slips in your pocket, a complementary camera to an existing Fuji, whether it's an X-T3 or an X-T4, just to have in the kit, or a secondary or first camera for someone who is primarily a smartphone shooter. Fuji, keep knocking to the park. This is a great offering, and I'm excited to use it more. My name is Patrick Tomaso. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, you will see me next time I feel like making a video. Cheers.